Good evening, children. Are you ready to continue the story? This is When Dragons Came to Alice Street by Francesca Hampton, Chapter 3, Rescuing a Prince. Several hours had gone by, and it was still dark when a distant sound made them all sit straight up, dropping all the warm sand on their chests onto their laps. Jackie yawned a huge yawn. "¿Qué?" she asked in Spanish, surprised to find that she had been asleep. She had been having a lovely dream of stars. "Drums," Tim announced after listening carefully. "There must be other people on the island." They all strained to listen. "They're not asleep," James pointed out. Sergio rolled his eyes. "You think?" James ignored him. "Tim," he whispered to his older brother in his most worried voice, "I think they're getting closer." And they were. The rhythmic sound of the drums was growing until the sound seemed to come from all around them. With one mind, all the children stood up quickly, trailing showers of sand, and dashed for the shelter of the bushes beneath the palm trees, burrowing into hiding places that allowed them to still view the beach below. The sky was still dark and filled with morning stars, but the approaching dawn had begun to soften the total darkness over the ocean. To the east. Amid the leaves, their eyes grew wide as a torch-lit procession came around the point and right into the cove where they had been sleeping. Over 100 islanders were in the line of men and women and children that made their way through the scattering of rocks at the far end of the cove. They came on, arriving at last at the center of the beach just below where the children had been sleeping. "Look, most of them are crying," Brenda breathed in her lowest voice. In fact, all the islanders did seem very upset about something. It wasn't a happy procession at all. The first walkers were carrying torches and wailing in a strange, sad chant, though none of the words were clear. As they reached the point directly in front of their hidden audience, it began to look like they had arrived at their destination. One by one, the walkers set their bamboo torches onto the sand and began arranging themselves in a half circle facing the sea. As the stars dimmed and the sky grew lighter, the children could see that the women were bringing forth bundles of flowers and rice wrapped in palm fronds, and even 2 live chickens. They placed all of these offerings in a row at the edge of the torchlight, facing the sea. "Who's that?" Tim whispered. In the middle of the half circle was a little boy about Tim's age, dressed in a long red sarong with a necklace of seashells around his thin chest, and a headdress of seashells and feathers that looked almost like a crown. Like all the people in the crowd, he was wailing and crying in a sing-song, ceremonial way. Everyone seemed to defer to him, bowing low as he walked around the giant half circle, and then went to face the sea, directly behind the line of offerings. Here he stopped and began to speak to the ocean in a high, strained little voice, like a child complaining to his mother. "What the heck is going on?" Sergio demanded in a whisper. "Shh," Brenda hushed him. "Do you want them to hear us? They could arrest us. We don't have passports." "Arrest us," Sergio scoffed. "You've been watching too many movies. We don't need passports." He said this without real conviction. "Look," James hissed. "They're throwing all that stuff into the ocean." The line of people had followed their prince and were now knee-deep in the small incoming waves of the flat beach. Next to him, Marina gasped. That lady threw the chickens! The thought of chickens drowning with no one to help them upset her deeply, because Marina had a good heart and she had always been taught not to hurt animals. Her mom, Julie, had read a book to her once that explained how people sometimes sacrificed animals in other religions, but now that she saw the living chickens frantically squawking and flailing their wings in the small waves, she was absolutely sure she had to save them. Before anyone even guessed what she was thinking, she was gone, scooting down the beach through the island people who were all too busy looking out to sea to notice such a small girl. She went straight into the water, and almost immediately she tripped in a hidden hole and came up gasping and dripping wet. But Marina was not scared. She had played in the waves enough to know that beaches often had little indentations in the sand and that the water was likely to be shallow again on the other side of them. She scrambled out further and at last managed to grab the two drowning chickens. This was not easy, of course. She had to clutch the birds to her chest firmly to make them stop waving their wings and trying to peck her. But at last she succeeded and turned, panting with effort, dripping with sea water, her arms full of chicken, to face the stunned people of the island. Marina! Tim cried, running out of the trees, trying to get her attention. She ignored him. Darn it to heck, he said. Come back. Jackie, too, had come out, and she looked at him disapprovingly. That's not swearing, he protested. Sergio swears a lot more than that. A great outcry among the people in the sea yanked their attention back. There was a terrific hubbub of voices and shrieks, and all the people circled around Marina. The little boy in the red sarong came running over to Marina and threw himself at her feet, kneeling in the shallow water. What the heck? Tim said again. Maybe he thinks she's from the ocean or something, Brenda guessed. Maybe he thinks she's the one they made the offerings to. It certainly looked that way. The prince even had his hands together now as he talked urgently to Marina as if he were praying. Marina stood stock still until the end of his speech, listening as politely as she could manage with two chickens trying to peck her. Then abruptly she handed one of the chickens to the prince, perhaps so she could have a free hand, and then reached out and patted him on the shoulder, saying something to that the children couldn't hear. Oh, now she's going to get in trouble for sure, Tim said. They'll find out that she stole their chickens and she isn't from the ocean and she doesn't have a passport. We've got to save her. Oh, you're always such a pessimist, Brenda reproved him. I think she's making friends with them. You're the one who thought they would arrest us, Sergio pointed out. And what are we supposed to do anyway, he demanded. There are 100 of them. Tim glowered at this lack of support and darted toward the circle of worshippers, running bent as long as he could get, as long as he could to get closer to Marina without anyone noticing him. He had reached the back of the line of people when he stopped in shock as he saw some men of the village lift up both the little boy prince and Marina onto their shoulders and start walking with them and all the bundles of rice and flowers and even the chickens back into the sea, into the deep water. The prince was talking earnestly to Marina. To his surprise, Tim caught a few words and realized he was talking English, and Marina was talking back. What the heck? Tim began to yell at them to stop, but the islanders were all chanting so loudly now that nobody heard him. He even followed them into the water, tugging on their sarongs to get their attention. He tugged so hard that one man's bare bottom appeared, and he turned around in astonishment to see who was pulling his clothes off. yanking the sarong back up again. He glared at Tim, indignant, and then looked surprised when he realized Tim was not from the island. Suddenly, a high command from the little prince cut through all the chanting, and all the sounds stopped dead, except the little waves, of course. "Marina!" Tim hollered. A few heads turned to look in his direction. "Marina!" he hollered again, a little less confidently. "She's my friend," he explained to the people nearest him. "She needs to come home now." "It's okay, Tim," Marina yelled over the heads between them. "We just have to finish this ceremony to make offerings to Mother Sea." "But," she added happily, "they promised not to throw the chickens." And indeed, as the chanting swelled around them again, all the rice and flowers began to fly through the air over Tim's head like rain, plopping into the waves all around. But the chickens remained safe, one each clutched in the arms of the prince and Marina. The people in the crowd seemed much happier, even relaxed, and even, Tim noticed with interest, getting sleepy. "The dragons are coming," Brenda said from right beside him, making him jump. "Look, everyone is getting out of the water and going up the beach to lie down, just like in the cruise ship." She marveled. And so it was. As the children watched, they had all come out from the bushes now. The people began to yawn and stumble and finally throw themselves down on the sand, snoring. The man carrying the prince barely managed to set him down before he crumpled beside him, and Marina had to make a little jump as the man carrying her sank to his knees and then keeled over. Oddly, the young prince was still awake. "You are from Mother Sea," he breathed, looking at Marina and then at the rest of them with awe. "You have come to help us." "Why do you need help?" Jackie asked, startling everyone. Jackie was usually the quiet one. "Yeah," said James. "Why were all those big guys crying?" This had upset him, though he didn't want to admit it. The prince went down on his knees in front of them and spread his arms dramatically. "Oh, holy ones, please hear my prayer." Tim raised his eyebrows at this, but the others just seemed to get more interested, leaning forward to hear what he would say next. "The waters are rising," the prince went on, "as the daily tides come and go. They are growing higher and higher with each season of storms. Little by little, our precious island is disappearing into the waves. This is the last white sand beach we have, and it used to be much bigger. When the storms come in the hurricane season, we fear the waters may cover the whole island someday, and we will have nowhere to go at all. This has already happened to some of our neighbors in the south. They have all had to go live in New Zealand." He paused thoughtfully. "We don't want to go to live in New Zealand. Please, noble messengers, tell the Sea Mother of our plight." "Tell the Sea Mother, tell the ocean about your plate?" Sergio asked, confused. "Your troubles," Brenda explained. She liked to read, and she knew many words that he did not. The other children were quiet. They did not know what to say to make the prince feel any better. And of course, it was hard to explain how they got there and why all the islanders had gotten so sleepy. The dragons were circling above them now. The little prince looked up and cried out in fright. Marina set down her chicken and put her arm around his shoulders. "Don't be afraid," she reassured him. "They are our friends." The prince stared at her with wide eyes. "Just a minute," Tim said, excusing him. He ran over to Gorwin as he landed on the sand. "You have to help us," he called up. The dragon frowned, a fierce dragon frowned at the sight of the young prince who had not fallen asleep. "Who is that?" the dragon asked. "Why didn't he fall asleep?" "He is the chief of these people," Tim informed him. And if you don't know why he didn't fall asleep, I'm sure I don't know. How am I supposed to know?" "Don't be cheeky," Gorwin reproved him. "And what is that fussy little creature he is holding?" "I'm not being cheeky," Tim argued. "You're the one who knows all the magic. In fact, you have to do some more of it before we go." The dragon raised one imperious eyebrow at him. "Do tell." "You have to make the sea stop rising," Brenda explained, coming over to back up Tim. "Yeah," Sergio added, "their island is sinking." "Actually, the island isn't sinking," Brenda whispered to him. "The ocean is rising. It's part of climate change." "It's out of the question," Gorwin said. "Even I cannot possibly affect the whole ocean. It is rising because all the cars and trucks and factories are making the air warmer, and the ice is melting in the north and the south. I can't just wave my whiskers and make the whole world change. Who do you think I am? I'm just one little dragon," he pointed out peevishly, sitting on a palm tree and squashing it flat. Dear, his mate leaned over to whisper in his ear, "Perhaps we could, uh, if we worked together at the same time." Hmm, Gorwin considered. "But it will cause an earthquake. Won't that upset everyone?" "Everyone is asleep," James pointed out, wondering what they were talking about. Hmm, Gorwin said again. He sighed deeply. "Okay, just this once, and don't you tell anyone," he glowered down at the little prince. "You just tell them the sea mother did it, or I'll come back and you'll be in really big trouble," he threatened. The little prince nodded vigorously. "All right then," Gandrina ordered. "Everyone aboard. And you," she nodded at the prince, "go hang on to that palm tree." They all obeyed, taking their places. The prince wrapped both arms around the palm, but craned his neck back to watch them as they rose into the sky. When the children were all in their places, the dragons lifted into the air, flapping their wings like pelicans taking off straight up, but 100 times flappier, and began to circle the little island in opposite directions, taking up positions at both ends of it. Steam began to come out of their snouts, and they seemed to be concentrating very hard, pumping their wings madly to stay in place like immense hummingbirds. Suddenly, all the palm trees below began to shake, and the most amazing thing happened. With a vast moaning, groaning of rock against rock, the island began to rise. Inch by inch, it slowly lifted out of the sea. Wet, streaming rock faces began to appear at the ends of the bay, with seaweed hanging off of them. And the beach where the people were sleeping got bigger and bigger as the water receded. In fact, the island rose at least 10 feet before it stopped groaning. Marina peered down and could see that the little prince had released his tree when the grating crashing sounds ceased. He looked around in astonishment and began to scamper ecstatically among his sleeping people on the beach, which of course was much bigger now. Waving his arms and whooping with glee, a few islanders were beginning to sit up, rubbing sleep from their eyes. "Time to go," Gandrina announced cheerily, flying by her husband. The children waved down at the little prince, who waved back madly. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Do you think he'll keep the secret? Sergio asked Brenda. Who would believe him? She pointed out. But she was grinning ear to ear like all of them. Hey, Gorwin, she yelled across from her place on Gondwina's back. That was great! And that little fussy creature was a chicken, by the way. Gorwin raised an astonished eyebrow. Really? He turned his head to look more closely at the tiny bird far away. But he still looked very pleased with himself. And that is the end of chapter 3 for tonight. I'll post chapter 4 tomorrow night.